Welcome to the first Hody TV podcast. Today we are with Mark Phipps, a shaper and surfer who lives between Oswego in France and the Bells Beach region of Australia. Mark is more than well known to many professional surfers in the surf industry, but most recreational surfers will know him for his popular creation, the One Bad Egg, one of the best-selling mid-length surfboards in recent times. This is our first podcast with a surfer who has been working with us on the Hody TV project. An idea to help share information from top-level surfers that will help you enjoy your surfing to the fullest. Having caught up with Mark on location to finish our post-production video work, we squeezed in filming the podcast on a terrace, with the last few minutes of sunlight and obviously in an untreated room. We hope the raw quality imperfections aren't too distracting, as Mark is a fountain of surfing knowledge and it's an amazing listen. If any of you recognise the type of beer and can guess where we met up to finish our work, then please comment below. We'll pick a few of the people who guessed it right and give some free access to the paid video service we've just launched. With that being said, we hope you enjoyed the podcast and what Mark has to say about growing up surfing in Australia and how the One Bad Egg came to fruition. Without further ado, Mr. Mark Phipps.
My name's Mark Phipps, an Australian surfer and shaper that for the last couple of decades, I've been lucky enough to live half the year in Oswego, France, and the rest of the time, in my home region, in Victoria, which is home to Bells Beach. So I'm kind of in that coastline down there in Victoria. I've been shaping boards, like I said, in Europe and Australia for quite a while now, since 1986 or 1987. I think I shaped my first board, and I got into surfing. Well, I got into shaping, from surfing, and I met a kid at secondary school whose father was a surfboard shaper, and to start with, I didn't believe him, because I thought, no, that couldn't be true, And then, I got to know him a little bit better, and worked out that it was true, and he invited me to go see his dad's factory, and went and saw his dad's factory. And so the first time I ever walked into a surfboard factory, I just thought it was amazing. To me, the boards looked like they were glowing, like they were lit up from the inside and stuff. They just looked incredible. And, I just fell in love with making surfboards, there and then, and kind of lost interest in school, probably, a few years later, mainly because, picked up a surfing sponsor, a sponsorship, and that made me think, I'm going to be a pro surfer. And so dropped out of school and started making surfboards, started working for my sponsor making surfboards. And that was at Watercooled with Kim Thompson, who now is, I think head of like surfboard production in, super large factories in Thailand. And, he's a real surfboard perfectionist. So he taught me, to make surfboards well. That was his main thing, his high quality. And I worked there with Greg Brown, who left Watercooled, and then a year or so I left Watercooled and went to work with Greg, and he started a surfboard company called Raw, and I worked there with him, and he started teaching me to shape there, and I shaped my first board with him, helping me along. And, back then it was, all hand shapes, obviously. It was way before, pre-shaping machines. And, really enjoyed doing that. And I've still got that board. Luckily, at that time, somebody I knew is, and I still know, is Wayne Lynch, and he said to me, keep it, whatever you do, no matter how desperate you are for a couple $100, don't sell it. He said, luckily he ended up just keeping his board, not intentionally, but he just kept it, and it ended up being a good thing that he kept it. He's happy. So he passed that tip on to me to keep your first one. And so I've still got that one. Pull it out every now and again and have a surf on it. And, I like the way it goes. It goes good.
What kind of board was it?
From memory, it's about a 6'1", real chopped off square tail thruster. It was, in the sort of early days of thrusters, fixed fins, and I shaped it and I did the spraying and the artwork on it and stuff like that. And it went very uncool looking board there for a while, but now it's almost coming back into fashion a little bit. It's got a bit of a beak nose to it. It's got sort of fairly flat deck and some beveled sort of down rails. Like I said, with the square tail and stuff, it was very uncool, and I wasn't very proud of it for a long time. But now I sort of look at it and kind of appreciate what it is a bit more. Yeah.
Growing up in the Bells Beach area must have been a real hotbed for surf life in general. What was it like growing up in that area?
Growing up in the west coast of Victoria, there's lots of surf, and there's lots of opportunity to surf, because there's the Southern Ocean there below us seems to be always throwing some sort of swell up at you, and the coastline's is very diverse, and you've got beach breaks and bays and points and reefs and all sorts of different waves and facing all sorts of different directions. So on any day, if you've got the time and the transportation, you can find some fun waves. So it's rarely flat, and with all the different sort of directions of the beaches facing, you can usually find a sheltered wave sometimes somewhere, and they're not super hollow waves. You don't do a lot of tube riding in that part of the world, but there are spots that do barrel. But you do a lot of work out on the face, sort of more longer, slopier waves. And it was definitely a buzz time in surfing. Surfing was really booming. Like pro surfing was evolving, and surf companies were springing up and really growing really quickly. So it was a pretty exciting time.
Now, you did mention the other day the age that you think you caught your first wave.
Yeah.
But how old were you then?
My mother told me that I was about 3, and I just had a foam board, and the beach that was behind our house was just a beach that doesn't really have surf, but it has waves that dump on the shore. And I used to just catch these dumpers on the shore and ride them in for a few meters before they hit the sand. And so she thinks around 3 I really was just really attracted to the foam board and catching waves. But like I said, I didn't really start surfing fiberglass boards probably until around 10 or 12, which in this day and age, like kids are already been surfing for years and ripping, but back then it was still quite young. And my first board was like a 7-foot single fin that was going to be thrown out. It was going to the tip, and my sister's boyfriend was throwing it out, and it was just totally destroyed. The single fin was snapped off halfway up it, and holes and fiberglass sticking out of it everywhere. I couldn't carry it by myself. I had to get a friend to help me to carry it to the beach. But to me, it was just gold.
Yeah. Yeah. And where did you surf? What was the place where you kind of crafted your skills?
Yeah, so I grew up in a little town called Point Lonsdale. It's about 30 minutes away from Torquay, and it has ocean beaches and bay beaches. So luckily, there was small sheltered sort of beaches, surf spots to start surfing in, and I still surf those spots now. Like they're okay waves, but there's always a little wave there. Well, not always, but quite often little waves there. So it was a good spot to start off and build up, and then once you got your confidence and a few skills, you could go around to the ocean beach and attack some sort of stronger waves.
When did you start doing that? When did you start kind of venturing into the well-known or the more powerful surf?
I think probably around 12. Yeah, so probably just a couple of years of practicing in the bay beaches, and then venturing around and having a go at the ocean beach. And you got to remember back then, like not many people would encourage you, very few people would give you tips or advice, and there was definitely no coaching, stuff like that, so, and on the flip side of that, there was more things like, grommet abuse, so, the classic of, getting tied to a pole or held underwater, or, your wetsuit ripped down around your arms and then held underwater, or, things like that. So it's kind of changed quite a bit. I know this, grommet abuse, stuff still happens a little bit, but that was more the attitude to, how you had to sort of work your way up in the pack, was deal with that and then, grow through it. Whereas now, you get a lot of support and coaching and things like that, which is great. It helps kids accelerate so quickly to a higher level.
Yeah. See how that would help you surfing more than being beaten up in the surf.
Yeah. And sorry, you go on.
Just your kind of career, obviously, like being in a great place and some great waves around there. Did you look at like competitions? Did you always just want to do your own thing or be inspired by some people? When did you really take a step forward in your surfing?
But from my perspective, you can't tell when you sort of took step forwards. When I took a step forward, but I was interested in competing. As soon as I discovered that the town had a local board riders club, so straight away become like a member of that. Going in every event that they held, going in as many divisions as they offered that I qualified for, and and being inspired by some of the local surfers, the better surfers, in the town. Like I said, my sister had a boyfriend and who became her husband, who was a surfer. He was a big inspiration and helped me along. He'd drive me around the coast. I'd wake him up and say, come on, let's go surfing. Let's go to Torquay or around that way. And he'd say, oh, okay, but you got to mow the lawn. So I'd have to mow the lawns or something for him, and then he'd take me in. But I think I got a pretty good deal out of it. I don't think I'd really, looking back, I felt like I was slaving away for those trips, but I don't think I really did that much. And there's a guy, David Quigley, who's my mate's brother-in-law, and he would do the same thing. He would take us around, around the west, drive us around the west coast. If conditions weren't ideal in Port Lonsdale, we'd get to adventure around.
You told me before over a beer about going past the kind of like normal south-facing surf spots and going to spots which kind of really get the roaring 40s, swells and so forth.
Yeah.
When did you first do that? Or who took you there? And maybe talk about some of those spots and how different they are.
Yeah, Victoria's very lucky that it's got some beaches that pick up a lot of swell. So most of the time they're too big. They're just closeouts or gigantic waves that people could probably tow into, but pretty remote. And when the swell goes flat on a lot in a lot of areas, sometimes you can travel to these beaches and they're still 4 foot or 5 foot or 6 foot, and you can get some great waves. They're very fickle and it's not very often, but I think the first time I went down there, a guy called Gary Kearney took me down there, and he was just a bit older guy, surfer in the Board Riders Club, and I must have just been lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time, and he was going down there and probably said, "Do you want to go?" And jumped in with him and went. And it's one of those places where you drive around a lot and search for banks, and you can spend a whole day searching and not really get much, but I think it was a bit of a trip like that, but it was just amazing to see these beaches, that I'd never seen before. Yeah.
And some of the more famous breaks around there, the Winky Pop and Bells Beach. When was your first proper swell surf there? Do you remember it? And
I started going in, state rounds, so competitions, that were, Victorian sort of level. and one of them would be on the West Coast each year, and it'd usually be at Bells Beach. So I probably first surfed, there, leading up to contests or in contests. And I haven't got a clear memory of first surf at Bells or first surf at Winky Pop, but it would have been early days, going over there to do those contests, when I was around 14 or so, and, competing in cadets, and then, a bit older going in, junior events.
Yeah, and at this age, obviously, you just mentioned you had your board riders club and you started competing. Were you getting some good results there? Did you know you were onto something with surfing? Had the fuse been lit for the passion? Were you all in there at like 13, 14 years old?
Yeah, I was a bit shocked, because somebody must have suggested, there's an event on in Torquay, and you should go have a go at it. And but I will. And I didn't think. I can't remember thinking too much about it. Will I win or will I lose straight away? I just went and had a go, and I made it to the finals. I'm pretty sure. Probably, I think I might have ended up third or something like that. And that's when Kim Thompson walked up to me, and he was something to do with running the event, and so he'd watched the event all day, and he came up to me and said, have you got a board sponsor? And I said, well, no, so I'd only bought one or two boards in my life at that stage, and they were, Christmas presents, or I'd saved up a bit of pocket money, and it was a Christmas present, and I said, oh no, and he goes, oh, do you want a board sponsor? I was like, yeah, and so he sponsored me, and I think was just shocked, like absolutely shocked, and that was a big turning point in my life. Yeah.
What kind of boards were they? What kind of surfing were you doing at the time? What was in vogue?
What was in vogue? All the classics. Just re-entries, cutbacks. It was before aerials. Definitely. Well before any aerial surfing coming in. So re-entries, cutbacks, getting tubed. It was thruster surfing. If you can picture that time when Simon Anderson won Bells, that big year, and he just introduced the thruster. It was in just those years, just following that stage.
Yeah, exciting times then. Where you're changing the direction of surfing.
Yeah. When it everything becomes sort of thrusterized. Like single fins and twin fins were just being abandoned, and everybody was wanting to get a thruster. Yeah. Of course, there was a few people that were super fond of single fins and twin fins, and they stuck to their guns for a while. But I think most people eventually swapped over. And it's funny to see, like, now we're in this era of really going back and experimenting with single fins and twin fins and quad fins, and developing all that stuff and borrowing from the past and adding some modern sort of design points.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's 13, 14 years old. You mentioned that shaping came along. That's probably a couple of years on from there. School and so forth. So what was happening in the interim there? Like, did you just decide that the comp scene wasn't for you, or did you decide that it was just about earning a bit of money because you just love surfing and just wanted to be immersed in the industry? So that was a good move. Just maybe talk about that, those couple of years and the decision to start to learn a craft. Yeah.
So it wasn't a decision about leaving comp surfing or picking shaping and surfboard making, because at that stage the two went hand in hand. Like at that stage, my idols were people like Mark Richards. He shaped and was world champion. Simon Anderson, was an idol. He shaped and was a top level pro surfer. So like it didn't seem like I was going off in two different directions. It seemed like one direction. So just making surfboards, was closely tied to competitive surfing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And what was that first job that did you start like at the bottom, like apprentice, like sweeping and
your classic, totally classic like that, sweeping, making fins, so you had to cut these panels of fiberglass out. You had to draw on with a template, draw the fin shape on it with a pencil, and then this huge bandsaw we had, and you had to maneuver this panel of fiberglass through it, and every now and again the blade would fly off if you sort of push the angle too much, trying to follow the curves of the fin, and it was pretty wild stuff. and so and it's all just glass dust flying off it and everything. We had masts and things like that, but still pretty uncomfortable job. But
how big was the setup? How many people? Was it a proper factory, or was it just like a?
Proper factory. With a shop out the front, and then a manager and a couple of shapers. Kim and Brownie were there shaping, and a glasser and a sander. And back then, you'd have like a pin liner and a finish coater and a polisher and stuff like that. So. A full operating factory and a full team of people, and like good fun times. Any of your breaks and lunch breaks and stuff were pretty entertaining. Eating food and chatting and talking about the surf and all the normal banter at on lunch breaks.
Yeah, it sounds like fond memories.
Yeah, really good times.
How long did you stay there sweeping then? What was the progression?
Yeah, it was actually quite quick. Like when I think about it now, it was maybe only a year or so there, and then Brownie left and started up his own company. But I stayed with Kim for a while, and then I think I left there and went with Brownie. I think I was doing a bit of both actually at one stage. I think I was working a bit for Kim and working a bit for Brownie, because they were both my friends and both my sort of idols at the time, and then somehow it worked out, it played out that I ended up just working with Greg, and and then he continued to teach me to shape, because Kim was showing me the basics at the beginning, and then Greg sort of followed on and kept showing me how to shape. And Greg's an amazing surfer and shaper. He's very fastidious and very precise, and so is Kim. I guess that's because Greg was a product of Kim as well. So there's a lot of people who came through that factory that have got that style. Because I think there's a couple of different styles of shaping. Well, if you want to just really break it up into two styles, but there's many different styles. I think there's some people who are great designers and are not so concerned about accuracy and precision. They just go, look, it's in. They feel like it's in the design that makes a board magic. And then there's other people who feel like it's design but with precision makes a board magic. And I think boards are just magic, and so there's no wrong or right way to go. That there's just two sort of styles like that, and then blends in between, I guess. And what I've realized with surfboards is that they're all magic for someone. Some of them are just trying to find the person. The person that maybe got it first might not like it. A couple of times I've sold boards to people that I've tried to like, because I really like the look of it and I've made exactly what I wanted, but it's not doing what I wanted it to do. And I've sold it to someone, and then you maybe bump into that person and you go, oh no, here's that person I sold that board to that I hated. And they're like, oh, how you going? And you're like, yeah, good. And they're like, oh, that board, I love it, and you're like, oh, good, So, boards quite often, find a home, and it might be with the second, third, or fourth, or fifth owner,
Yeah, sure.
So hopefully they all find their perfect match sooner or later. Yeah.
It seems like, looking back at the history of surfboards, and it's a creative process too.
Yeah.
There must have been so many different kind of influences for you throughout your career, even like you say, starting right at the beginning.
Yeah.
What kind of boards that you might have read about or not been in direct contact with? Like, who did you look to, and what would excite you as you were learning to shape? Kind of external influences.
Yeah. Right. So, boards like locally, like what Kim and Brownie were making, and Morris Cole was in Torquay at that stage, and then people would come back, say, from trips, from Hawaii or something like that. So you're always influenced by Hawaiian boards, because they're Hawaiian, So you'd look at those, and everyone would be hands all over them and eyes all over them if someone went to Hawaii and bought a gun back or a board back from there. So I think we're very influenced by the Hawaiian shapes, and probably not long after starting to shape and live in Torquay, I started going to Hawaii every season, not to compete, to just what we called it our holiday, but we just go there and surf flat out for a few weeks, and look at boards, and you can't help but look at boards. We'd go to the shops and check them out. Sometimes we'd even buy a second-hand one if we we're missing a board, and so that was I guess a big influence. And we were at that stage, we were chasing bigger waves, like nothing compared to what people surf now. Back then, we'd surfed a big wave, but it might be 8 foot or 10 foot. Now that's nothing on the scale of what people are surfing. So we were keen to surf some bigger waves, because Victoria gets all those swells, Winky Pop gets some swells, and so we were very interested in Hawaiian type guns and developing Victorian guns. Yeah.
Was Hawaii your first foreign trip? When did you first travel for better surf? A lot of Australians obviously love Bali and Indonesia.
Yeah.
What was your first trip, and how old were you?
Yeah, I think I was probably about 18, and I went to Tonga and Samoa, and or maybe just Tonga and Samoa. Yeah, we didn't go to Fiji. Tonga and Samoa, searching for waves, and that was a conscious decision not to go to Bali, because, like you said, Australians are famous for going to Bali. So everybody seemed to be going to Bali, and for good reason. There's great surf there, and so I ended up, later years going to Bali. But for my first trip, I didn't want it to be just that, normal thing. I wanted to be something, different, and heading out into Tonga Samoa at that stage, it had been done before, but it wasn't the normal sort of travel path. We were sort of adventuring a bit. Some surf camps were starting to set up. Some waves had been found, but there were plenty of waves out there that were undiscovered that, we tried to discover some, and that was a great trip, because I think I was 18, because I remember the first stopover to get out there was in Auckland, and we had an overnight stopover, and the guy I was travelling with, Alan Rousel, who a glasser, and still does a lot of glassing for me when I'm in Victoria. He dragged me along, and he's, I don't know, a few years older than me, and so we got this overnight stay in Auckland, and we go out, of course, and have dinner, and then go to a bar, and then we try and go to a nightclub, or maybe it was even when we first just tried to go to a bar. They've gone, ID, and I've gone, look, I'm 18, I probably just turned 18. And the guy went, well, bad luck, mate, it's 21 in New Zealand to drink. I was all stoked, thinking, I just turned 18, I'm in. And he's like, it's 21.
Better rethink that.
Need to, research before you go.
Walk around the block and try again. Yeah. And how about Hawaii? Like, most surfers obviously think of Hawaii as a mecca. You've obviously talked about it. A lot of some famous pro surfers said, if you can't prove yourself in the waves there, then maybe you're not really that up to much. But when was your first trip? And you always speak very highly of Hawaii, and
Yeah, like I said, we used to have our annual trip there. I think quite often we would go in October and November, or later in the season, but normally in that beginning of the season, and try and get there just before the pro contests that were starting, and not too crowded. It was kind of crowded back then, but it wasn't too bad. And we just loved, I guess getting out of Victoria. It's fairly cool water and a cool climate. So going somewhere, warmer, strong waves, which was our passion, and Greg was a very fearless surfer. Tony Ray, would quite often be with us or staying with us, and he was a very successful pro surfer, and renowned for his big wave surfing. And occasionally, Wayne Lynch should be with us, and he's absolute amazing surfer, and beyond fearless sort of surfer, and so that sort of really pushed me, because I'm not naturally a surfer who chases big waves. I kind of need a bit of a encouragement and push along, and like I said, what we were calling big waves is not big waves anymore. So, but we're having a bit of a go in some medium-sized waves.
Everyone's got a different personality, right? How you approach, the risk of a situation.
Yeah.
Having a bit of inspiration and motivation in different ways can be helpful, right?
Yeah. You probably, some days, you're probably self-motivated. Other days, you need a little bit of, come on, we're out there, Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So your shaping career's coming on a bit. You're obviously surfing with a great group of people, getting some trips in.
Yeah.
Mark Phipps surfboards. How long along the track how many steps were there before your brand that we all know today, arrived on the scene, and how many other kind of stepping stones were there? And there's probably a lot to say there and to that question, but how would you describe that?
So like we said, I started off working at Watercooled for a year or so, and then at Raw for I think it was only a year or so, and the brand sort of morphed into Gash, and then I can't remember how many years Gash was around. Well, it's still around, but how many years that we were all together there doing Gash, and it was probably 4 or 5, and then I just felt like I wanted to go off in my own direction, and so I left then. So probably, well, what are we up to? Probably 10 years along the track after I'd started, I kind of felt like it was time. I can't remember whether I was kind of like nursed along, pushed along to go, or just splintered off. And it's a natural thing. Like when it's sort of like doing an apprenticeship with somebody, you teach somebody to build houses. They work for you for a while after the apprenticeship, and then you kind of generally go off and start your own sort of building company.
And where was your home for shaping? Still in the same area, or did you have to move to a different area? Where were you? Where was Mark Phipps Surfboards incorporated?
Yeah, in Torquay. So I lived in Torquay for 10 years. So basically from about 17 to around 27, and at that age, I just I think when I went to the world titles in France in the Australian team, and that's when I discovered Europe and wanted to start spending time in Europe each summer and then time in Australia each summer. So when I was spending so much time in Europe, when I started coming back to Australia, I didn't want to be sort of 30 minutes away from my hometown. So then I started spending sort of more time back in my hometown, and traveling to Torquay for work or surfs, and and living and surfing in my hometown as well.
So that was the start then, right, of the French migration, and then back to Australia, because you spend 50-50 until obviously pre-COVID, but 50-50, right, between the two.
Yeah,
two
for the last decade or two. Yeah, there's a little tweak to it each year. Sometimes it's 5 and 7, sometimes it's 4 and 8, but basically half the year in Europe and half the year in Australia, and that's since that all began in about 1992. Yeah.
What boards did you shape to start with when you set up on your own? Like, who were your customers? Was there someone pro who, you know, wanted to have like a, you know, be a team rider, or did you just have some customers that wanted like custom shapes? I mean, you're still shaping by hand, I would imagine, at this moment.
Yeah, it's still hand shaping, and from memory, it was customers that are built up from working at Gash really, and so they were friends and people that you surfed with, So it wasn't a lot of boards. It was probably making a board a day or something like that. Just ticking along, living pretty cheap, and surfing a lot. The main focus was to get hours in the water, and earn enough to get by. Yeah.
What kind of year was this?
What kind of year? When
when you started like your own surfboard company.
I wonder. Maybe it was about late 90s or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So pre-internet age. Travel.
Oh yeah.
Travel. Not everyone really had access to travel and so forth. So an English guy trying to get an Australian surfboard, there had to be like a big name or brand or distribution and so forth in order to reach them. So relatively unconnected world at that time.
Yeah. I was making boards for a handful of people that lived in my area. Yeah, okay. There were friends and family or people that you just knew from surfing with regularly. Really, that you might get chatting with and organise making a board for them. Definitely a whole different network than these days. It's a whole different world. You're just not connected. You're just connected with the world now.
And what kind of boards were they? Were they like you're kind of like your short board, kind of thruster board, or were they? Because the waves down in Victoria, if you think of Bells, you said yourself about slopier faces and maintaining of speed and so forth. What kind of boards were you making?
In that era, everything was getting more and more refined. Boards were quite bulky, but then during those eras, I think the 90s and early 2000s, Kelly Slater was starting to lead us into thinner, narrower, curvier boards, and we were all going with him, and they worked. They still work, and I noticed a few people starting to play around with them again. Because over the last 10 years, we've all gone wider, thicker, maybe not always longer, sometimes, shorter, but volume, the volume is your friend thing, how many times have you heard that? So everyone's upped the volumes from back then. But now I think, we've pushed it pretty far. There's, everyone's surfing a lot of volume, for good reasons. But I think some people are starting to play around with like, I want to try a really refined board again, and there's a place for it at times.
Yeah, we'll get on to some of those things because where you put the foam, volume's not always equal to other surfboards' volume and so forth. Yeah. But I guess the board you're probably best known for at the moment is the Wombat Egg. There's obviously been a mid-length kind of momentum shift.
Yeah.
People who get a little bit old but want to catch waves and up their wave count, and like you say, zip around the breaker a little bit better and catch more waves.
Yeah.
So when was the Wombat Egg designed? Was it a certain day, or was it over an iteration of different designs that you got to it? Like, how did it even come about?
Yeah. It came about 7 years ago, I'd say, about 7 or 8 years ago. And it was probably, I think, coming about through frustration of surfing refined boards in less than ideal conditions, just surfing probably some sloppy summer surf, and just wanting to have a fun session after work and wash the foam dust off and cool down, and just having probably too many shockers in a row on a short board, and those boards were just starting to pop up coming out of California, so you'd see images of them, or maybe one to pass through the factory or something like that, for a board repair, and so it probably inspired my thinking. And I had young children growing up, and I thought, okay, here's a family board, so kind of went with the excuse, I'm making it for the kids, and
right.
which I'll never forget when I walked in the door, came in the front gate with it. My wife saw me with a one bad egg under my arm, and she's like, "Whoa, you are getting old," so she sort of pegged it straight away that, it wasn't for the kids, and it wasn't, that, it probably, I needed it to keep myself interested and motivated, as I was starting to get a little bit older, as a surfer. And so that's what, what you mentioned before. I think they're very good for that, for people that are getting, becoming an older surfer. But then on the other hand, they're great for, new surfers, not total beginners, but if you've got through that beginner stage and you're looking for, your first fiberglass board or your second fiberglass board, it's something that's user friendly and, suits that type of surfer as well.
I think you mentioned before that you just said now for like, sloppy day, sloppy conditions, or maybe smaller, not great, great waves. But then a customer turned around to you and said, I use it as my gun now. So
yeah.
At what point then after you made it, did you start to realise that people were using it in really good surf as well, and realise the kind of the versatility of the design? When did that happen?
Yeah, not immediately. I had that feedback from a couple of people, and I didn't trust it or believe that feedback, straight away. I just thought, that maybe they were, that was unusual and would be a very rare thing for it to work like that. But then, when it started getting that feedback, more often, I realized that, that it's more versatile than I thought. And then in saying that, like, it's, people are using it as a gun, but not like, at a high level and for, gigantic, barreling waves. It gets used as a gun or a step up board in sort of bigger, deep water, slopier type, big waves. Yeah. And again, not big waves like we're, getting recorded these days at 60 foot, we're talking big waves, 10 foot, 10 foot big waves.
Yeah, well, it's clear you've got obviously a lot of experience with making the boards, but also surfing. When the videos we've made together of you surfing like the wave pool on the mid length, it's also got a bit of performance to it too, right? There's nothing really you can't do, like fundamental turns of cutbacks and and trying to get vertical and so forth and speed. So
so that's why it's called the one bad egg, because I was trying to think up a name for it, and I wanted it to be, like an egg shape. Well, it is an egg shape, and everybody was calling it, their egg or my egg model or something like that. And so I wanted to put some performance in it. I sort of can't help but, like, pretty much every board I shape, I try and put performance in it because I think we all want to perform, really. So I used that egg outline and the lower entry rocker, but through the middle section and the tail, I tried to have a fairly performancey, bottom curve, and in the rails and fin positioning and everything, it's all, got some performance in mind. So, I wanted it to be an egg with attitude. I said at the start, I was thinking, the attitude is to still try and, progress your surfing, not just give up and surf an egg and stand there and say, I surrender, I'm kind of giving up, So I was thinking attitude, and then I was thinking, okay, bad, and then I said, you can't really call your build bad. But I did. So that performance attitude that I tried to put into it, that's the bad bit of the one bad egg, and then obviously the egg bit's the egg, and I guess one was yeah, it just had a bit of a roll to it, and it was the first egg shape I've done, and the only egg shape I've really done so far. It's because that one worked out so well for me.
It's got a quite interesting recommendation fin wise from yourself, and you surf it like the recommendation of a 2+1.
Yeah.
People, it's not. I don't think it's an obvious choice to start with, but it works, right? So how did that happen? Did you try it always as a 2+1? Did it start with a thruster, and you just playing around with fin design and fin placement?
No, it's to me it's a 2+1. Board. Some people order it as a thruster and it works for them, and I'm sure it works. But I've got lots of thrusters. I've had lots of thrusters. I'm going to get lots more thrusters. I've got heaps of thrusters. I was thinking, like, I don't want another thruster. I want this to have a different feeling. I still want it to perform, but I want it to perform in different ways and draw different lines. I don't want to go out there and thruster surf on it. Even though, it is a thruster configuration, really. It's got 3 fins. But, in your large back fin, smaller side fins. But it's not that longboard setup. It's a longboard configuration, but the back fin's not really large with really small side bites. It's kind of got more your normal thruster side fins with a medium-sized rear fin. Yeah, and because of the way I've configured them, I feel like it's fairly free still. Like it seems like it's a bit over finned. When I tell people, put your normal side fins in the side, and then a big fin in the back, it's like, oh my god, too much fin. But I find that works, for on that board, and it probably doesn't work for other people, but then you've got the option to change. Because you've got a box, and then you've got a fin system in the side, so you can put side bites in the side and a huge one in the back. You can put a thruster setup in there, and so fin systems these days are so good. People, I don't think experiment enough, and I don't experiment enough, and I try and experiment a lot, and I've got lots of fins, but it is a hard thing to change them, because you're normally pressed for time, or you're just excited and want to get in the water. You don't want to miss the right tide or timing. So just want to jump in. So I can understand why people don't change them, but if you can, experiment, you can have a lot of fun. Yeah.
Just remind me and remind anyone who's listening to this about what you were saying about the fin box placement, about moving it forward and back. What's your take on it, and when do you move the fin?
So my theory for loosening up a board or making it a bit stiffer and drivier is to move that back fin, that medium size, like around a 7-inch single fin that I put in the back of it. And if I go for a surf and it's small and mushy and summery and weak, and I feel like I'm not able to maneuver the board very easily, I'll move the fin forward, whether I get out and change it, or I've got one of those fins where you can just pop them out and move it, and just push it forward a centimetre or a couple of centimetres, and that frees the board up, it makes it looser. You lose a little bit of drive, but if you're surfing some mushy summery sort of waves, you're generally not needing to launch down the line anyway, so it's it's not a factor. And you get to the beach and you're like, ooh, Swell's a bit bigger than I thought it was. I can bring that fin back a little bit and stiffen the board up and give it a bit of drive, so it will hold in a bit more. So because there's a lot of board there, it's easy to have those types of boards just drifting around, or you feel like you're getting a bit out of control, so you can bring that fin back and control the board more and drive and carve some turns on it.
We need to refill the beers.
Yeah.
I need to get the light, because otherwise we're going to be black silhouettes.
You should see the sunset. It's amazing.
Cheers again.
Cheers, James. It's been a good week here in our secret location, working on clips for Hody TV.
That's it, for our secret project.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe switch gears and maybe talk about our trip to Alaia Bay in Switzerland, and your thoughts on wave pools and what your how did you enjoy the trip and your feelings about the waves and what you got to do there.
I love the trip to Alaia Bay in Switzerland. Was epic. Like I've said to people, it's one of the best surf trips I've done, and they're like, no, really, what was it like? And I was like, no, it is. It's one of the best surf trips I've done. It was epic. It's a whole different world to going to the Mentawais or going to Hawaii, but that's what's good about it. It's not the Mentawais, it's not Hawaii. It's a whole different trip, and it's a great trip, and it's such a good facility there with the pool, good waves, good food, friendly people. And it's really well run and really well organized. So I enjoyed it, and it's took me to a part of the world that I wouldn't get to, because I don't ski or snowboard because I'm always in summer in Australia or summer in Europe. So it took me to that part of the world too, which is a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah. I think it's very easy with new technology, and everyone's got a different opinion, which is they're more entitled to.
Yeah.
But it's to take a view on wave pools and if it's good or bad for the sport. But I think once you've surfed in one, you realise it's a complementary training tool.
Yeah,
it's pretty special. I mean, you surfed all the different waves, right? You surfed like Malibu waves and advanced and expert and pro waves.
Yeah. I surfed almost all the settings, and the ones that are the lesser, I shouldn't say the less the settings such as Malibu and beginner. I think I even went out in the beginner one maybe that was Malibu on the foamies. Yeah, Malibu. So those smaller size waves and so much fun. Like just to play around in and to catch a lot of waves. You catch so many waves in an hour. You're exhausted, and just have a good time in. I think a lot of people start a bit too high on the setting that they pick. I think it'd be wise just to come back one level and start there and just get the hang of the pool, because there's a lot of things you need to take in and learn, and then work your way up.
Yeah, it's tricky if you've not surfed a session or actually been in the water, even looking at them. The one in Melbourne and the Bristol pools, you're quite far away from the actual wave breaking, and it can look relatively small, and it is small compared to some big ocean waves, but the waves still work, don't they? And it can be difficult selecting your first wave, which session to go in.
I think if you're in doubt, do I start at expert or do I start at what's below expert? Advanced. Start at advanced. If you're thinking, do I start at Malibu or should I go for the advanced? Go with the Malibu and go out and cruise a bit and and get more value out of it. Ride more waves, have more success. Learn about the system. Queuing and stuff like that. That's a whole different world to surfing and hunting down your wave. You're out there queuing for your wave. Things like that. There's things to adjust. That's if you're an ocean surfer, you've got to adjust to those things. And if you haven't surfed really at all, there's so much to learn. You've got to learn surfing and the rules of the pool or the way the pool works. Yeah.
It's interesting. You surfed the Malibu on the one bad egg, but you actually keen to go back in and use a foamy board to help people actually enjoy their sessions there, to show them that all the fundamentals that you can do for the other wave settings and other boards you can learn on that on that setting wave and on a relatively entry level kind of board.
For sure. It's just great fun, and you're not out there just going straight or in white water or anything. You're on the face, you're doing turns, and and I just found it really good value, because in an hour caught so many waves. That's the thing. I guess I just like riding waves, I guess. So I felt good. I think I rode 20 waves, so for me that was great.
I remember you coming out between feeling pretty excited and happy, right?
Yeah.
But it's not always like the bigger waves or the barreling waves. How did you find the barrels when you were there?
Very intense and very tight. So you need to be able to get down low. But you're stoked to get barreled. They're very the water's such a beautiful color, and the shape of them and the intensity of these little spinning and running barrels. It's pretty exciting, and it's pretty nerve-wracking, like your first time at having a go in them, because you're like, oh yeah, am I going to be able to ride the barrel? Am I going to make it? And so getting barreled is great fun, whether it's in the pool or in the ocean. You don't get the big stand-up barrel, but how often do you get a big stand-up barrel? Like I live at a beach in France that's famous for big stand-up barrels, but if you get one a season or a couple a season, you're happy. There's some, so obviously if you spend a lot of time in the ocean and you're in the right spot there at the right time, you might get a truckload of them, but you can go to Alaia Bay and line up 10 in a row.
Yes, it's the B1 wave setting. It's pretty useful tool for someone who's actually just trying to get a feel or just get anywhere near it. I mean, some surfers would have been, having a normal life, not having the opportunity to live near the ocean. Yeah. And now they get a chance to surf it. Yeah.
It's a lot of lucky people that never would have got a chance to surf are going to get to surf, and it's impossible to say where it's going to go. Is it going to become this great training tool? Is it going to create a lot of surfers? Is it going to be good for the sport? Is it going to be bad? It's impossible to see into the future, but at the moment, I feel like it's a good thing so far, because when you go there, it's such a friendly way to go surfing, because you don't have to hassle for the wave. So when you're getting prepared for your session, you see the other people that are getting prepared for it, and you're not looking at them like you are at a surf spot going, oh no, more people have turned up. You give them a wave or say hi. You're going to be in my session, and you're not competing for waves against them, because you're taking in turns for waves. So you're going to be taking it. So the good old fashioned way, like still happens in some surf spots where people take in turns. Oh, I think it's your turn, and you go. Where I live in Australia, it's a bit like that at some of the breaks. It's you got to remember your when it's your turn, and so it takes that out of it. So you're in the pool, you're friendly to each other, and you're taking in turns. You're sort of having a chat or complimenting each other or having a laugh about your wipeouts or whatever, and then you get out of the water and then you become even more friendly sometimes, because you've just had this fun surf together, and you get out and you have something to eat and a drink, and talk about the surf you had, and how did you end up here today and stuff like that. Yeah.
Did you find many people asking you for some help when you're in the different sessions? Would people approach you and talk to you about kind of ideas and help?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a little bit of a busy situation to get chatting too much, and there were sometimes I wanted to help people, because you could see a little mistake they were making that was making them miss a lot of waves, or nosedive on takeoff, or wipe out on the takeoff, and you could see that if they got past that point, they'd be having some fun waves. So a couple of times I couldn't help but say, look, I hope you don't mind, but I've got a surf school and I'm a surfboard maker, and I could give you some advice. Would you like a tip or something? And most of the time, people said, oh yeah, sure. What have you got for me? And you just say, look, correct this, and I think you're going to change this, and I think you're going to have a better surf, and you know, most people, you know, appreciated that, you know. So I think it was good, but so I think what we're trying to do, what you're trying to do, is help people before that, you know, because it's a little bit awkward situation trying to do that in the water. You know, it's a little bit late. You know, you need that information. You know, well, it'd be great if you had that information before you get in that situation.
Yeah, surfing's definitely one of those things. It's a journey, isn't it? It's you know, there's no need to like sound too hippie-ish about it, but there's many levels to knowledge and ability, and it's not so apparent to start with. Yeah. It's almost like the more you learn, the less you realise you know. So
yeah, for sure, and you keep learning. You know, like I've learned heaps of different little, you know, techniques and, you know, or tricks or whatever you want to call them. You know, at Alaia Bay, you know, things to do, and it's a good place to practice things because, you know, it's repetitive, but not so repetitive that it's boring. You know, there's just slight differences in the waves. You know, it's very, very slight sometimes, but it's still, just gives you enough variation to keep it interesting. And then, you know, you've still got, you know, weather conditions and things that make the conditions, you know, make the waves, you know, a little bit variable.
Yeah, it's interesting that Alaia, it doesn't have the Bay Area like Bristol or Melbourne.
Yeah.
So it's a smaller body of water, but they don't run 20 wave sets because the currents are moving around and you can calm it down a little bit. Yeah. So like you just said there, the variability in the waves, I mean, that's kind of reflected in how they set the pools up.
Yeah. Like, I guess so. Like, I don't know what makes the waves vary like that, but it's kind of it's good. Otherwise, it would be boring. Otherwise, you would just go, okay, yeah, I've just surfed that wave too many times. I can't face it anymore, you know. But you sort of keep taking off and thinking, oh yeah, what's this one going to do, and where am I going to fit in my turns, and you know, how many turns am I going to get on this one, or how far is it going to run, or So yeah.
And you're heading back to Alaia for the competition, aren't you?
Yeah.
You looking forward to that?
Back to competing. Yeah, sure am. Yeah. I guess I'm pretty competitive. I think it's going to be a fun weekend. Like it's more fun based event, I think, but it's a competition, so it'll be interesting to see, like how serious it is. But I think once it's a competition, it's a competition. You can say, oh, it's just fun, but when the siren goes, it's on.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're travelling with probably your number one competitor, aren't you?
Number one competitor. and my my number one team rider.
So Mark's referring to his son, who's doing fantastically well in the competitive scene. How old is he now?
He's 13, and we have competed against each other, several times in our board riders club, the Pont Lazar Board Riders, and I don't think he's beaten me yet. But because of COVID, we haven't competed against each other for a couple of years. So from 11 to 13, he has improved a lot. So, and I think he's gone very close to beating me back there a couple of years ago. So, I wouldn't be surprised maybe at this event if he gets one up on me.
Well, just after we went to the pool together, he did a little trip, didn't he?
Yeah. He went there with Mickey Picon and Jeremy Flores, and then other kids at his age, Alex, Axel Dominguez, and Hugo Flory, and I think a couple of the Quicksilver kids from Portugal, who I don't know. I don't know their names, unfortunately. Yeah. But I was spying on them a little bit using the Alaia Bay. Hopefully Jane never sees this because he still doesn't know I was spying on him. But I was using the Alaia Bay, webcam, and watching them surf, and they were ripping it up and having a good time, and they were in a full grommet frenzy. You could see they were pushing each other hard, Yeah. So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting event.
That's it. That's what I'm getting at. So I think watching the comp and seeing the results and seeing some of the surfing, you got some competition, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be fun. You know, of course you go in an event, you know, hoping to do well, but you know, I want to get there and get in the water there and surf again. And you know, I had that August experience of, you know, summer and warm and surfing in board shorts and surfing in, you know, shorty wetsuits, and now I'm going to have this more winter experience with, you know, the snow on the hills, the famous scenes that we've, you know, that you see out of there, where you're in the valley and surrounded by snow. We're going to have that, and you know, that's probably what I'm most nervous about. But like most intrigued to see, but most nervous about actually getting cold. You know, like, and can I handle it? I'm more worried. You know, can I handle the cold, or am I just going to, you know, wimp out and go, no, too cold, I'm not going in.
The equipment's so good nowadays, right?
Yeah.
And, I think we were surfing in 5 degrees in Bristol, and it was, you know, full session. People are game for it.
Yeah.
But out in Alaia, the facilities are so good that, you know, they'll have you warmed up and looked after straight away.
Yeah, that's what everybody says, and you know, you've seen those famous images of Hawaiian surfers there, you know, surfing in the middle of winter. And so that's given me confidence that, you know, if people that have grown up in a tropical area can go do it, you know. And I grew up in a fairly cool to cold area, so hopefully I can handle it.
And then after that, what's next for Mark Phipps? It's off to Australia, right? Now that the COVID travel arrangements allow it.
Yeah. So yeah, back to Australia in, you know, next month, and yeah, so that's gonna be great. I haven't been home for 18 months. You know, I've been with the border closures and, you know, restrictions on traveling. You know, it's something, you know, we could have pushed to get home, but you know, it hasn't been easy for anybody to go anywhere, has it? So I've kind of just sat tight and enjoyed, you know, the time in Europe, and yeah, had my first winter in 26 years, and you know, tried to enjoy it, but it wasn't in a good time really for anyone much, was it? You know, with COVID, and so you know, I've always had in my head, I'll do a winter in Europe, and you know, do what Europeans do in winter. You know, travel to the southern parts of Europe, or go to the mountains and do stuff like that. But I was here for that season, but you weren't allowed to do any of that. So maybe I'll have to do another winter one day. You know, when you can do the classic European winter type, you know, activities. Yeah.
Well, we'll see if we'll be able to catch up in Australia together. But your content's going to drop in the next few weeks. We've finally caught up and worked through all the surfing you've done there at Alaia Bay. Yeah. And that's for like obviously intermediate and more advanced and barrels and so forth. But we've also got like those foamy sessions on the Malibu waves.
Yeah.
If people have any questions or follow-ups to the content, you know, just ask questions away here in the comment section. Come to the site, you know, maybe drop some comments in the Instagram account as well. You know, Mark's pretty receptive and he's a fountain of knowledge. So let's see if we can get more information out of him than you know, any follow-up stuff, right?
Yeah. I'm happy to sort of you know, give any information, any tips I can, you know, but yeah, I need that inspiration. I think, you know, I need that sort of questions, you know, to sort of draw it out of me a little bit. You know, I'm not really a spiel it out, but you know, yeah. If you've got questions, you know, send them in.
Yeah, well, the beauty of technology, we'll probably be able to do another kind of webcast. Maybe it might be on different continents, but
yeah, that'd be good.
We can pull all the questions together and put them to you.
Yeah,
do a Q&A session or something.
Yeah, hopefully we can go surf at Urban Surf in Melbourne.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Excuse to get out there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Mark, thanks for your time. Thanks for your help at Alaia, and yeah, it's been great, like working with you and stuff like that. So thanks, mate.
Yeah, no worries. It's been a pleasure, James.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, that's a wrap.
Okay.